Slowhands Rock Talk Show.
Looking to get a professional website built at an affordable cost? Then look no further. Nova Web Design offers you all the services required to put your business on the map. Whether it's website redesign, website development or website maintenance, it's all here and more. Click the link in the description for more info. Before the video starts, if you could do me a huge favour and make sure that you have subscribed to the channel. It's free, it only takes seconds to do, and it really does help the channel continue to grow. Now on to the video. So Steve, Thank you so much for making a little bit of time out of your day to come on to the podcast and to speak to myself about all things music. Before we get started, how are you actually doing today?
Doing good, man. Just went and hung out with my pops, my dad a little bit this morning, and did some workout stuff with him. And we've actually, since we've been home, my dad plays music. That's where I get it from. So we've been writing some songs together and recording and starting to mix some stuff up. Brother Chris, he's been helping us on some mixing on some stuff. So excited to get some new music out with my pops and get some new Blackstone Cherry music out this year. It's a good year for new music.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Well, you kind of just touched on it there, but what we'll do is we'll go back to the very beginning. So for yourself, where originally are you from?
Same area as the other three guys. I essentially live was born and raised, I guess you could say, in the next neighboring town over, the next field with milk cows and chickens over from them, if you will. In a town called Horse Cave, Kentucky, and then which is like 10, 15 minutes drive from Glasgow or Edmonton, where the other three guys are from. So, right here in the same neighborhood, man.
That's cool. And obviously, I was going to ask, were you exposed to music from a young age? I'm assuming that you were. And did that come mainly from your dad?
Yeah, my mom and my dad. So when I was a kid growing up, we grew up going to a local church in the town that I'm from. And so I started playing drums when I was about 5 years old and playing at church. My dad played guitar. My mom sang in the choir. And I told this story in an interview a couple of days ago, and it's one of my favorite stories. I love it. Because, we were playing a lot of church music growing up and stuff. But, for years, my dad has played in all kinds of bands, cover bands to original bands and stuff. And so there would be times where maybe like my mom and my sister were like gone on Sunday afternoons. Maybe they were still at church or doing something. And me and my dad would be home alone by ourselves. And I had a drum set. Of course, he had his guitar and rig and stuff set up. And, we would jam like AC/DC and Leonard Skinner and stuff like that. And my dad would make the joke. He would be like, "Now, don't tell your mom we were playing this stuff." Just innocent being a kid,
Yeah, my dad, he didn't play any instrument, but we definitely bonded over music. He grew up, he was born in the 50s. So he would have been a teenager going into his 20s around the late 60s, 70s. And, so a lot of the bands he introduced me to, the classic bands, the Beatles, the Stones, Creedence Clearwater, The Who, The Doors, like the list goes on. And but what's really cool, though, is all these years later, I was born in the start of the 80s. So I'm a teenager in the 90s. So you've got obviously your metal from the 80s, you've got the grunge era coming through, you've got all the new music coming through. But I was able to introduce him to a lot of that, and he liked a lot of it. A lot of it he didn't like as well, but he liked a lot of it. And it's cool that we could kind of both feed off of each other. But for yourself, obviously your dad's introducing you, probably similar to my dad, introducing you to all these classic bands, AC/DC and all that, those types of bands. Who were some of the bands that you discovered for yourself when you started to discover music for yourself?
That's a great question. Because like you said, my dad, it was a lot of classic rock, Southern rock, outlaw country, old country. My mom was very much into like 80s new wave is kind of what they called it at the time. So, she was probably listening to like Cyndi Lauper, to Billy Idol, and a lot of soul music as well. I remember my mom playing a lot of like Ray Charles and B.B. King and Otis Redding, stuff like that, Chuck Berry. But, there was definitely songs and bands on the radio that, when I was a kid growing up that I was getting turned on to, like Nirvana or Alice in Chains, Guns N' Roses, stuff like that. And then, whenever I started to really pay attention and dive into music more and developing my own taste and stuff like that, when I was around middle school and high school, I remember like hearing Seether for the first time, bands like Dark New Day, which I freaking love and still listen to. Shout out to Clint Lowry, one of the Seven Dust guys. Love Seven Dust as well. Remember listening to a lot of Foo Fighters. What else? Pantera. Creed, Crossfade. I'm a big Crossfade fan. We got to play with those guys, I think, like last year, so that was huge for me.
It's funny that you mentioned Dark New Day, because I actually contacted the singer just the other day. I sent an email hoping to get him on the podcast. But they're one of those bands that they never made it over here. Like most people probably haven't heard of them. And,
but they're like a super group.
Yeah, but I knew people that lived they lived here and they moved away to San Diego when they were teenagers, and they were brought up in San Diego. So they were of the same age as myself. They're in their 40s, so they were of the teenagers when Dark New Day were like massive. And that album that they brought out that had like Brother and all that on it.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and of course, they introduced me to that band. I think it was like One Side Zero was another one. But I mean, those bands nobody's really heard of them over here. They never really made it over here. But there's some great music, though.
Absolutely. Like, I still remember, like, when I was a kid growing up, the first internet speed we got was dial-up internet. I remember what it was like growing up pre-internet, playing outside and stuff like that. But we had dial-up internet. Of course, nobody could call and talk on the phone whenever you were on the internet. But I'll never forget coming home one day from school. I still had one of the old white desktop computers. I think it was like a Compaq or a Dell. YouTube had just came out, and it blew my mind, because for years you'd have to go back and replay the records or wear out the cassette tapes and stuff, to get that guitar part or drum part or vocal part, whatever you were trying to learn. And I remember it like it was yesterday, just coming home, getting on my desktop computer. YouTube just came out. So I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't hanging out with people. I wasn't going to parties. I was like, wow, I got YouTube and I can watch 5+ camera angles of someone breaking down a song or a guitar lick. And I remember when I got on YouTube that day, when I came home, it was like a Tuesday or Wednesday. It's weird how you remember things like that. And I remember that music video for Brother by Dark New Day popping up and watching it, and it just blowing my mind. And Clint, man, he's a riff master. He's one of my favorite guitarists. I love his riffs.
I'm just laughing when you're saying dial-up. I'm old enough to remember dial-up. And I remember I went to see Metallica played here. I think it was around 2003. And it's just like they'd introduced this new thing to their website where you could download, like you would go and see the concert, and the next day the concert would be available for download.
So, I love stuff like that. Government Mule does that a lot. They do the Mule tracks.
It was dial-up, so I had to start downloading it at night time when everybody went to bed, because you weren't expecting phone calls. And it must have downloaded for about 8 hours, and I had 5 songs. There was still 10 songs to go or whatever it was. It took forever. But also,
I miss it.
Similar to yourself, though, I remember sitting in work one day, and our work back then, you could access the internet, and it was in its infancy, and there was a new website came out called YouTube, and when everybody left the office, if you had to work till maybe 8 o'clock at night, most people would leave by 5 o'clock, so you could just sit and do nothing for the last 3 hours.
Man.
I remember straight onto YouTube, Pantera Live, just sitting watching Pantera videos thinking this is the best thing ever, because obviously before that it was actually hard to find like concert footage. Like people nowadays, you're just so used to it being accessible through YouTube, but back when I was growing up,
we appreciated it more. It was more of a journey getting that stuff, or having to drive to a record store to get a cassette or a vinyl, or like you said, waiting for hours to download something online so you could listen to it back when we still listened to records in its entirety and cared about the journey. And now it's just like, I think we take it for granted because we can just pull up our phone and call anything up in 2 seconds, you know?
Well, it is pretty cool that you can also do that though. There is something.
True.
But give me a laugh, Steve. What was the first professional concert that you ever attended? Do you remember who the band was?
Oh, do I? Absolutely. I'm actually in that. I'm in that band now.
All right. Okay. So when was that in?
I'll give you two, and the first one is the most important one, because like I said, you know, when I was a kid growing up, I was playing drums at church with my dad. So, you know, I had a lot of the older women and stuff in church would come up to me and tell me what such a great job that I'd done and stuff. So, you know, it gave me a little bit of false confidence, I guess, if you will. Because at that time, I'd just been playing in church. You know, I've not been exposed or went out and watched a lot of live shows. I mean, I wasn't even 16. I didn't even have a driver's license or anything like that.
Yep.
And then one of the first shows I went to, especially first rock shows, and this is the first show that really changed my life, was watching Black Stone Cherry at the Cave City Convention Center here in South Central Kentucky. They had just got done, I'm pretty sure, doing their first European tour where they went overseas and toured with Hinder. And I've always said there is something special about watching, you know, any American band, in my opinion, that goes overseas to Europe or the UK, and you get that energy and you get that love from the crowd, and then you come back to the States. That first show you see a band when they come back from all that love like that, it's just it's amazing. They're on fire, you know, where they've got all that, you know, energy and just appreciation, respect, you know, everything. And because sometimes, you know, I don't know why we just don't appreciate what's in our back door until it goes across the pond. Like Jimi Hendrix, you know, he didn't get as much recognition or love and respect until he went to Europe and played with Clapton and did all that and came back, right?
Yep.
So I remember it was at the end of that Hinder tour. I think it was in November. Watched Black Stone Cherry for the first time. And the Kentucky Headhunters played that night too, I'm pretty sure, that same weekend. And I immediately quit playing the drums when I got home, because I was like, this is it, dude. Like, I have seen the greatest drummer, I think, alive. Definitely the greatest drummer in our area, in John Fred Young and his uncle Fred Young. I can't compete with that. I can't do anything like that. So I don't know why I had it in my mind. I was like, well, I'll just kind of switch to guitar. I'd already been playing guitar, but I was like, I'm going to fully be a guitarist now, you know, because it's not like we got Greg Martin and Ben Wells and Chris Robertson and Richard Young, all these other amazing guitarists in our area. Like, that would have been easier to switch to. But that was the first show I went to, man. And I never have in my life has seen so much energy on stage, so much passion, so much love for rock and roll, and just music in general. And around that time, after that first Black Stone Cherry record came out, it really inspired and rejolted our music scene where we live at here in Kentucky. And we've always had a pretty thriving music scene, but I think like any music scene, it kind of goes in waves. You know, maybe you'll have a scene kind of going on for 5 to 10 years, and then you have like a dull moment and music kind of changes and transitions, and then a new scene will spark after that. So they kind of definitely rejolted things and sparked our local music scene whenever Black Stone Cherry came out after that first record, for sure. So that was like such a monumental, important show for me, and probably one of the next like biggest one. This is like the biggest production show I've ever been to. It was at an arena in Louisville, Kentucky, and I got to go watch one of my all-time favorite bands, country bands, the band Brooks and Dunn, and that just blew my mind. And just, made me want to play music 10 times more, because I was the type of kid growing up, like I wanted to get there at like 8 o'clock in the morning just so I could sit outside and watch trucks and tour buses roll in and, watch forklifts pick stuff up and watch the show, getting set up. I remember as a kid going to the state fair in Kentucky, sitting out on the loading docks, sneaking away from my grandfather and my brother. I'd want to sit on the loading docks watching airplanes take off and land. And I would, sit there and fantasize, like, I wonder which band or artist is flying in to play this state fair. Like, wow, how do they get all their gear over here? Like, I wonder what guitars they've got with them. Like, did you fly your whole drum set? So I had all these questions, right? So anytime I could be around anything, it didn't matter if it was a big production show, a coffee shop show, a small venue show, my local town, I wanted to be around it. But basically, to summarize and answer your question, the first one was definitely Blackstone Cherry and the Headhunters. And then the big production show where I got to see all that for the first time was definitely Brooks and Dunn for sure.
Yeah, I do say that to people that you kind of touched on it there as well. There's something really magical about going to a live show. And it doesn't matter what style of music it is. Whatever style of music or band that you like, there's something really nice about going to a show. And you could be having problems at home, problems at work, but for the 2 hours that you're in that concert, it's great. Everybody's on the same page. There's no trouble. It's like the band and the audience are one. And then it doesn't matter what anybody playing live, it sounds better live than it does on the album. And I think it's something everybody should experience at least once in their life. They should go to a live concert, because it sounds so dramatic, but it is life-changing. I started going to concerts back in the 90s, and I'm in my 40s now. I still feel the same way going to a concert now that I did back then. It's never changed. That energy, that excitement of going to a concert is still the same all these years later.
Yeah, man. There's just a different type of human connection that you get, when you're a room full of people that you probably don't know. But, it's even like a sporting event. I'm a big Chicago Cubs fan. I love baseball. And, for me, I kind of get that experience where I go out and I watch a Cubs game and I'm sitting in the crowd, and it's so surreal watching 40,000 people at Wrigley Field, tune out the world simultaneously at the same time. And everybody's smiling, everybody's cheering, everybody's talking about the game, getting that alleviant of existential angst. And I don't ever take that for granted, playing live music, because that's what a lot of people are getting to when they go to a concert. They're in a room full of people that they may not know, but they're all like singing along. They're all high-fiving, they're pouring their hearts out, watching their favorite band, singing along to some of their favorite songs. And it's the coolest job in the world, man, to get to do that and provide that for other people. But there's just something about, live, like you said. And a lot of my favorite records are live records, just for that, cause of the energy. And that's why, I've always gravitated towards, some of these bands, how these bands recorded some of this music back in the day, like setting up live in a room and just going for it. And, instead of doing individual tracking stuff like that, which is great. And there's, time and place for everything. But for me personally, it's just a different type of energy that you recreate when a band sets up in a studio and they're just live and they're just going for it. But at the same time, we all love Led Zeppelin records, and, they maybe would do individual tracking. But, when you listen to something like Zeppelin, it feels like you're stepping into their world that they're creating for you on tape, and how, they used certain things. Like, I always love one mic technique that Jimmy Page would use. Apparently, after they would track something, they would set mics up in random spots of the studio just to record air going through the mic. because, you know, if it's sitting on the floor versus somewhere up in a corner of a ceiling, you get a different sound of air moving through, and how you can blend that air in. I mean, this is like real audio nerd stuff, right?
No,
but you know,
it's like even back in the very old days, like you listen to songs recorded in the 50s, right?
Yeah.
They've got everybody is round the microphone, and when it gets time for the solo, the person steps forward just to increase the volume a little bit, and then they step back when they're done. I mean, that stuff, that it doesn't happen nowadays, or it doesn't happen as often nowadays, or even bands.
Yeah.
I love the Doors. The first Doors album and the last Doors album is the band live in the studio. They just mic'd everything up and then hit record, and that was them. They didn't have they weren't able to do overdubs because the recording technology was so primitive back then. But the band had to perform.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's pros and cons to that, you know, because like when you're limited to recording resources, I think it pulls a different energy and different creativity out of you, because you kind of got to compensate a little bit for what you don't have. Now we live in such of a world of plenty, which is great at the same time, because there is people out here that's doing things with modern technology. It's making some amazing records, and they may not be sitting up all tracking together live in a room. They may be doing this or doing that, and that's great too. But that's also the encouraging thing at the same time, is there's no rhyme or reason or path or set of rules how to make a record or record a song or release it and do all this stuff anymore. Which is encouraging if you're an up and coming band or artist, you know, that way you don't feel like that you have to go by this one formula that you may or may not be able to financially afford. So it's kind of cool to see how people get creative with different things, just like there's still people recording to 2-inch analog tape. And there's still some people doing digital. You can do all of it, you know?
There's no right or wrong way to do it. I mean, you look at Metallica's Black Album, you know, the amount of time they spent to get the perfect drum sound. But there's a reason why 30 years later, it's still one of the best sounding albums of all time. You know, there's good things and bad things. But obviously, Black Stone Cherry, they started way back 2001 time, which I think would have been around the time you probably seen them. Am I right in saying?
Yeah, early 2000s, a couple years after that.
And obviously you didn't join them until 2020. So what were you doing between seeing them in the early 2000s and up to 2020? What were you doing with yourself? Were you playing in other bands? Were you just working a day job? A bit of both?
All of it. Working hard, man. Just trying to work hard and get out there and play some rock and roll. I've worked so many public jobs in my life, you know, from factory to retail, and bought my first business when I was 23 years old. Yeah. Me and one of the guys from the last band I was in, we bought a music store, and, you know, so sitting up at 3 a.m. in the morning doing taxes and balancing out the cash register and trying to make payroll and all that. So it was great. And the last band I was in was a band called Otis, from right here in our area in South Central Kentucky, which I played guitar for about close to 8 or 9 years, I believe. And so that, you know, was my first professional band of really getting out and touring. And we were signed to a record label on our second release that we put out with a label, Cleopatra Records, out of L.A. And so that was a super cool experience to get to do that, you know. Learned how to tour those guys, learned how to write and play music with those guys, learned so much. And then over the years before that, during that, and even still to this day, you know, I've always played music with my dad. My dad has always, you know, been home. It's always been a safe haven. And I remember when I graduated high school, I went to Nashville for a little bit and kicked around in Nashville, tried doing the Nashville thing. And it just wasn't for me. You know, I always loved being in a band and one collective group, people working towards a common goal. Nashville, it's very much, you know, everyone's treating it like a job. And even if it is a band, you know, it doesn't have that same kind of feel or magic. And I just remember getting discouraged a little bit when I was doing the Nashville thing and thinking, you know, if this shit ain't any better than this, I'll just go back home and play with my dad's band on the weekends and be 10 times more happier and fulfilled. So, you know, my dad has always been a safe haven for me, getting to play with his bands over the years. And, I could go back and play with my dad, and we would play all that stuff I grew up playing with him, Leonard Skinner and classic country and old rock and roll. But yeah, so when when I was in high school, first band I was ever in when I was 14 playing guitar was a Christian rock band called Quarter Three, and did that for a little while. And then there really wasn't a whole lot of people playing music at my school growing up. So that's when I graduated. I went to college for a little bit in Bowling Green, Kentucky, studying guitar. I was going to get my professional performance degree in guitar. So I studied classical guitar, music theory, voice training, group piano, all that music history, a bunch of different stuff like that. Yep. And I realized quick that, it's not like, say, let me just pick a random band. Let's say, I don't know, Aerosmith. They need a new drummer or something, or fill-in drummer for a tour. It's not like they go through all the recent graduates from Berkeley of music or Belmont, Nashville. It's connections, knowing people, et cetera, et cetera. So I realized quick that I was going to be in a lot of debt just to get a music degree that I couldn't really do anything with or get a job with. So I dropped out, and that's when I went to Nashville and kicked around there for a little while in the early 2000s. And I joined Otis in 2012, and then started playing with Blackstone Cherry in December 16th of 2020.
So how did you cross paths with the Blackstone Cherry guys? Like, that come about?
Just running into them at Walmart or the dollar store or Mexican restaurants.
I know that you were saying that you obviously live in the same area. Did you know the guy prior to sort of being in a band with them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I said, we living in the same area, so we shop at the same places, we eat at the same restaurants, and maybe they were home and the band that I was in at the time was playing a local show. Maybe they'd come out and watch us and hang out, and or I'd go watch another local band play. Maybe some of them would be there. It's a small town living type stuff like that. And then once I was in Otis, the last band that I was in, Blackstone Cherry over the years would let us come out and open for them on the road in the States. And I think Otis, when I was in the band Otis, we were the first local band that ever opened for them overseas in the UK. So that was really cool. We got to open for the guys at like Caerphilly Castle, the Barrowlands in Glasgow, Scotland. We did Aberdeen Music Hall in Aberdeen, Belfast. We did Ulster Hall and the Academy in Dublin, Ireland, some stuff like that. And last year of Ramblin' Man Fair, we played that. And so, just kind of small town living, I guess you could say. And in a way, the Blackstone Cherry guys over the years was kind of like, our older, bigger brothers, I guess. So when they would let us come out and open for them, they were trying to teach us some things too, like this is how you tour, this is how you do this and do that. And the guys have always been so awesome about that over their entire career. Whenever they've had opportunities to take local bands from our area out with them and let them open up, they've always done that. And that's super cool.
You've painted them out, Chris, Ben and John, you've painted them out to be really nice guys. So I was going to say to you, if you were to describe each of the band members in a few words, how would you describe each of the members?
In one word?
Or a few words.
A few words. John Fred, rock and roll wrestling. It's like watching, Kevin Nash or like Hulk Hogan take on the entire NWO Wolfpack or something at the same time when he's up there playing drums. Or he's a Paul Bunyan-esque man on the drums. Chris Robertson, he's an alien. He's like a rare comet or a rare alien, like, Jimi Hendrix, I think, that just we got so lucky that it hit the world and he was born and we got to have him and I get to play in a band with him because he's such a creative guy. He's such a great songwriter, such a great person, got a big heart. But comet, I'll go with that. He's a comet that blessed this earth, and John Fred is rock and roll wrestling, and Ben Wells is definitely the Energizer Bunny / Mr. Rock and Roll. He just breathes and elucidates rock and roll, I guess, if you will. And it's always a joy trying to keep up with his ass on stage every night.
How would they describe you?
Oh God. The redheaded stepchild little brother that's always hanging around. They felt sorry for and let him in the band.
That's fair enough. But obviously,
I'll go with that one.
you did say that you joined the band at the end of 2016. So you're talking 5 years. How quick has that 5 years went for yourself?
So quick, man. Jesus. It's so fast. It seemed like just, 2 months ago I joined the band, and we were, my first show, seems like it was just yesterday. We were playing in Orlando, Florida with Steel Panther, and Joey Fatone from NSYNC was there side stage hanging out. And, you blink and then you've been on, one studio release, one live album release at the Royal Albert Hall, a record store day EP, and now a new EP that we're putting out March of this year. So don't blink, man. It goes by quick.
But you're talking about obviously EPs and that coming out. What is the band's songwriting process? Does the band have a songwriting process?
Yeah, we mainly spend so much time throughout the year touring. So, pretty much how it happens really happens organically. We're at sound check and we're just kind of waiting on the guys our crew guys to give us the green light to hit a song or to go, play a song. So in the meantime, we're just kind of messing around, maybe riffing, and, Ben may play a riff. John Fred may play a groove. Chris may sing something or play a riff. I may play a riff, and somebody may be like, "Hey, play that again." Or somebody get a phone out and record that. And then, we have, ample time during the day while we're waiting on showtime. So, we'll take those riffs to the back of the bus and, pull out the laptop, plug in a guitar and a bass, and just demo things out. And what was really cool about this current EP that we're getting ready to release is we did all of that, and then we set aside some time at home at Ben's house to kind of solidify things. All right, now let's kind of go over some of these demos. Let's kind of do some more critical listening. Do we need to add something here just to kind of trim the fat and smooth things up before we went into the studio to knock things out. So, it was, it's awesome because, and thank God for technology and the ability to do that, because that way you're not sitting in the studio. What was that riff you played like 7 months ago, in this city? And, so thank God we have those abilities.
What's up, everyone? Kev, Chris and Jason from In Charge, and you're watching Slowhands Rock Talk Show, talking all things music.
Just a very quick message to say thank you for watching. It really is appreciated. If you could hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and remember to hit the notification bell. That way you won't miss any future episodes that come out. Now back to the video. And we spoke about this before, but for Blackstone Cherry, how do they like to record? So, for example, do you record the rhythm section live? Do you just start with the drums and layer everything on top? Like, what's the preferred way for the band to record?
A lot of times it kind of may vary just depending on what mood we're in, but there are some things that, we do, I guess the band does in continuity, I guess, if you will. It is harder just for everybody to set up in a recording studio and record everything live. Even when you do that, you still have to go back, make some punches or fix some vocal takes or whatnot. But, we'll go down or to the studio and usually kind of knock out the drums first and, start working on guitars and bass and vocals kind of after that. And then, kind of listen to everything there towards the end and see if something needs a harmony or something needs a guitar lick or a bass lick or some added percussion or whatnot. But, man, it's definitely a labor of love for sure.
That's fine. Here's a question. It's probably quite a hard one to answer. And we kind of, again, spoke about it a little bit earlier, right? But obviously the band has had success prior to you joining. It's got continued success with yourself in the band. There's a lot of bands, a lot of musicians out there that's their dream to do the same job that you're doing. So being someone that's part of a band that has had success and continues to have success, what is the secret? What makes a band succeed? Is it ability? Is it songwriting? Is it who you know? Is it just pure luck, the right time at the right place? In your opinion, what do you think makes a band succeed?
I'll see if I can narrow it down to like 3 key points, because this is something that, I am passionate about.
Yeah.
Because, spending so many years as an up and coming artist, trying to connect those dots and, seeing so many bands and artists, whether it was friends from where I grew up that I think are just as good and just as capable of being out here on the road doing it full time like we are, any other band, but maybe it didn't work out for them.
Yep.
Or other bands or artists I've came across over the years where maybe they took a different path because it wasn't working out for them. What's the answer? What's the secret? Or people ask all the time, how is Black Stone Cherry so big in the UK? Like, how could I do that for my band or my career, etc., right? All these questions.
Yeah.
So one of the first most important pieces of advice that I got from the guys and from the Kentucky Headhunters when I was starting out is it's basically having your priorities straight, especially if you're in a band. And that advice was being brothers first and being a band second,
Right.
because it's like you're like building a house essentially when you're building your career or you're building your band, and trying to get the right band members to play with. That's half the battle. Some groups don't even ever accomplish that. And when you do accomplish that, you have a whole another set of obstacles you got to face. You're taking on the world. Here I am. Here we are. Here's our music. We want to earn a spot or at least a license to be ourselves and to make enough money to put a roof and food over our heads and in our bellies so we don't have to work a day job, right? That's really what everybody wants. So, keeping that, that the number one main focus, because if someone comes up and they compliment Chris or they compliment me, John, Fred, Ben, whatever, we don't let any of that go to our heads. And when I was a kid growing up, we don't let any of it go to our heads because we don't care about our individual selves and ego and stuff like that. We care about the band and us together, So if someone compliments me, I appreciate that. But ultimately, I look at it like it's a compliment to the band. And that's what's more important. And I think, in my opinion.
Well, nothing destroys a band quicker than ego.
100%, right? 100%. And I remember just, like a lot of us watching every piece of content or movie or TV show or behind the scenes content I could growing up as a kid. And it was like you said, all the stupid stuff like ego or addiction problems or stuff like that broke up so many bands or ruined so many bands. And I remember watching the movie Almost Famous, growing up as a kid. And, when he was interviewing Russell Hammett by the pool, that one scene in the movie, he was kind of alluding to like, well, I'm better than these guys. I'm a better musician than these guys, but I can't leave them because if I leave them, then they're not going to be able to make as much money, blah, blah, blah. I don't like that kind of way of thinking. So when I was consuming content like that growing up and hearing that mantra, that good discipline, good principle from those bands, Black Stone Cherry, the Headhunters, be brothers first, a band second, I always kept that in mind. And, because these are the guys, when you're a band, these are the guys or the girls that you're living with, you're touring with, you're taking on the world with. So you have to be a cohesive unit. You got to be together. Next piece of advice that I remember hitting me like a Mack truck, a semi truck when I first heard it. And it's kind of, it doesn't help those that's looking for instant gratification or just hoping you can put a video on TikTok and be famous the next night. Yeah. It doesn't help people looking for that, but it's very important and it's very tried and true. I remember watching Joe Bonamassa's entire career, and, I think he went through some different identities. Like, for a long time, he was a strat guy, hardcore channeling like Eric Johnson or maybe Stevie Ray Vaughan. And then it kind of looked like you kind of had a Clapton moment there for a while. And that's fine, because I've had my moments too. When I was a kid growing up, I wanted to be the fourth guitarist in Skynyrd, or I wanted to be the second guitarist in Pride and Glory, because I was a big Pride and Glory fan with Zakk Wylde, that band he had in the early 90s. That's another one I grew up listening to. So we all have those moments and channel certain influences. But when things started to really, click and really build, and we're really working for Joe Bonamassa. I remember him saying in an interview one time that if you just keep it together and you just keep going and don't quit, you will eventually find a spot. There will eventually be a spot for you. Or you can look at it like, you can't be denied by the music industry, I guess, if you will. If you're not going to quit and you're not going to give up, you will find a lane, you'll find a spot, there will be a place for you. Yeah. And what was the third one? Maybe it'll come back to me. But, just even going off those two things, persevering on, not giving up. And it's hard, because I'm sure every successful band when their career is starting out, was probably maybe a couple years into it, and you saw these bands blow up overnight, and next thing you know, they're opening for the Who or Rolling Stones or GNR or Aerosmith, and you're like, well, I've been a band longer than them. How come I'm not? And then next thing you know, they're like a one-hit wonder, or they're gone, the next year. So, I think maybe this could be the final third thing. Comparison is the thief of joy. Comparison's a bad thing. You never need to compare yourself to others or to another group or anything like that, because it can take away from what you're supposed to be working on. It can take away your confidence, and it can take away from staying in your lane. So, you got to keep going. Don't give up. And, you got to keep the main thing. So if you're in a band, be brothers first, be a family first, and everything else second. And I live my life by that mantra, family first, business second, taking care of myself first, and other things second. Because if I can't take care of myself and I'm not good, then I'm not going to be good for anything else I care about, like my family or the band that I'm in, or, whatever projects I've got going on, or work, etc. So, yeah.
What is something that you know now that you wish that you knew back when you were starting out? See, if you could go back and talk to your younger self, what would you say to yourself?
Patience and time. Patience, because time is on my side so much. Whenever you're just a teenager or you're in your early 20s, you could be 18 years old and totally mess up the next 10 years by trying some career path that you thought was for you, and then you realize at 28 it wasn't for you, and you need to try something else or pivot, and still have your whole life ahead of you.
Mate, I'm still doing that, and I'm in my 40s.
Right? And you still have your whole life ahead of you. I mean, if you ever need a swift kick in the ass, go hang around some people around your grandparents' age, or go to a nursing home or volunteer, at a nursing home. When one of my last living grandparents was in a nursing home, rehabbing after having a surgery done for a little bit, I'd go sit with my grandmother almost every day. And, and at that time, I was in my last band, and, we were riding in a van, sleeping in a van, playing long shows for no money and for nobody. And, you're like, man, when's this ever going to take off? When can I quit one of these 3 public day jobs that I'm working, and maybe just have to work 2, And then I would go into a setting like that, or go around my grandmother, who just wanted to feel well enough that she could spend time with her family and friends, or go to church on Sundays. So it made me feel about that tall. It made me feel like my problems were like that tall. And it made me realize that any of these people in that nursing home, including my grandmother, if they could trade spots with me, being a 20-year-old kid again for just 5 minutes, they'd do it, in a quick second. So I think patience and time, because, patience, because you're not going to have everything figured out when you're 18. Hell, I'm 34 and I don't have everything figured out. I'm sure you could say the same thing. We're still learning every day, right?
Yeah.
And these are just life things in general, but obviously that can play into your career and can help you have a more, fulfilling and fruitful and sustainable career. Whether if you play music or you're interviewing and own a podcast like you're doing, or if you work at the local grocery store or auto repair shop, man, all these things can play into your life to help you be more happy and more fulfilled. But I think those two things, patience, because it's okay that you don't have everything figured out at 18. It's okay you don't have a hit song yet at 21. It's okay that at 24 you're not touring with these artists that you want to, or you've not graduated up to a tour bus yet, or a bunch of crew guys. It's okay. And time. You've got time on your side, you know.
It's funny you saying that anybody in the old person's home would swap places. There's a saying, youth is wasted on the young and wealth is wasted on the old. And it's so true. It's like, when you're young, you don't have a clue. You wish you had the wisdom that you had when you were older. But then when you're a bit older, you've got things worked out a bit. You maybe wish that you were a bit younger again. But it's funny you saying that. I don't know if you've heard of him. There's an old American blues guy called C6 Steve.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And
John Paul Jones played bass for him for a little bit from Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, I've seen him through in Glasgow. But I can't remember what year it was now. I think it was 2005. Around 2005, there's a television show here in Britain, the Jules Holland show.
Yeah.
A lot of bands and artists will go and perform. I don't know how they came across C6 Steve, because nobody had heard of him. And they always do this show. They do it each week, but they always make a big deal of it on New Year's Eve. They have a lot of bands celebrating the start of a new year. And C6 Steve appeared on it. Now, he would have probably been in his 50s, maybe 60 years old, and nobody had heard of him. And it was almost like overnight he was this sensation. And he's had a career ever since, a career that he can come to the UK and tour. Prior to that, he was doing bits and pieces. He was probably playing and touring in America. But that one appearance on that show when he was 50 or 60 years old has enabled him to have a career later in life where he can come to the UK and he can tour it. It's an amazing story. You don't hear it happening too often at that point in life, but it's really cool that one shot that he took made his career later in life. It's really cool to hear that.
I'm so glad you brought that up. First, one thing that anybody who watches this episode, if they get one thing, I hope it's what you just said. And I think a big thing that helped him with that, and that brings me to my third point about helping up-and-coming bands and artists that I forgot earlier, is songs. It's like I give music lessons, and I tell some of my guitar kids, like, you know enough on the guitar, just like really focus on songwriting. Because, I see some people out here that, on the road, they may not have the best musicianship, but you don't have to. Yeah. What gives us a career is songs, not the guitar solo or, a drum solo. That's cool and that's great. But yeah, I mean, C6 Steve had songs, and that just goes to prove and show you it don't matter what age you are. If you've got a song, man, you got a shot. And that reminds me of two other blues artists, Charles Bradley, who I'm a big fan of. Mm-hmm. Charles Bradley spent over 40 years in Brooklyn, New York, being a James Brown impersonator. Wanted to be an original artist and tried over the years, but this is very admirable and this is very important, because sometimes as bands and artists, we fail to realize that there's a real life outside of this. And if you don't take care of real life, it's going to make your career suffer. So he took care of his grandmother, I believe. It was his grandmother's mother for years, and he was their caretaker. And there towards the end of his, I think it was his grandmother, maybe his life, that's when, unfortunately, she passed, but he was able to kind of get out there more and pursue things more with music. But he did not sign his first record deal, and he didn't blow up until he was 63 years old. And then he was out here playing Lollapalooza. He was touring over in Europe, doing festivals in Europe. He was touring with Sharon Jones when she was still alive and around. He was on the Wheel of Souls tour with Derek Trucks and Susan Tedeschi. And the last one I'll give you is probably one of the most biggest blues artists in this modern day that we're all influenced by and love, and that's McKinley Morganfield, or AKA Muddy Waters. Yeah. I was thinking about this literally earlier, that You know, in the South, a lot of people, I guess in the early 1900s, little music history lesson for everybody. A lot of people, primarily, black people that were living in the South were migrating to different cities for better job opportunities, right? Be it in Detroit or Chicago or New York City, because things had changed. We got farm machinery equipment, so you didn't need, hands on the farm as much and stuff. So it kind of made manual labor obsolete in a way when we got tractors and things like that. So they started migrating up to these different cities. And it also caused like a lot of that soul music that came out of Detroit or the blues movement that came out of Chicago, right? But Muddy Waters waited. He did not move to Chicago. He watched all of his friends leave his area and move to Chicago and other areas to start their career and started to have success while he stayed at home for years and watched that happen because his grandmother lived with him. And his grandmother raised him when he was a kid. And he told his grandmother, "Now I'm going to do the same for you. I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to be with you up until the end and take care of you." And when his grandmother passed, when he was in his early 40s, that's when he finally moved from the South and moved up to Chicago. So again, my point with all of this and the point with C6 Steve, Muddy Waters, Charles Bradley is you're never too old to start, man. I think that's the most motivating thing is you're never too old to start. Like you said, C6 Steve was in his 50s. Charles Bradley signed his first record deal at 63. Muddy Waters didn't move to Chicago to start his career until he was in his 40s, and look what happened to him. He's one of the founding fathers, if not the father of blues and electric blues music, so it's very encouraging.
Yeah, it's just keep at it. I play guitar, and the amount of people that come up to us asking, they're thinking about learning the guitar, but they might like the rock greats like Van Halen or Slash, and they're all great guitarists, but I'm saying Johnny Cash made a career out of playing 6 chords. You don't need to be the most technically gifted person. You need to be a good songwriter. That's it. Sticks with people. Don't get me wrong, I would love to be able to play like Slash. They're all great guitarists, but it's got to be Slash when he's playing serves the song. The song is the main thing. It's not Slash playing his guitar solo. It's the song.
Exactly. And that gives you the license to be yourself and to play drum solos or guitar solos. I'm a huge Van Halen fan. Who isn't? I love Eddie Van Halen. Big influence on me. But you can't sing Eruption. You really can't sing along to it. You know what I mean? But it's those songs like Running with the Devil and Panama and all that gives you the license to get up there and write something like Eruption or get to play that every night, so.
Eruption's great, and it's great to see him perform it. But you don't want to see him go. You don't want to go to a concert and watch him play it for 2 hours. You want to go there. It's like a little moment in time, but you're there for the songs.
Right. 100%. Because, there's so much songs that cater to our lives. When you get married or watching your kids get married, or if you graduate college, or you have songs that we always listen to when we're driving down the road or when we're working out at the gym. We listen to so much music that just caters to our moods. And I kind of feel like personally we live in a genre-less society now, because my playlist, dude's all over the place. It may go from, like I said, from Metallica to Brooks and Dunn while I'm at the gym and everything else in between.
Yeah. But Steve, we're obviously very early in 2026, if you can believe that. So what is the plans for Black Stone Cherry for the remainder of the year? I know that I had a wee look on the website earlier. Corn Exchange, Edinburgh, 30th of October. I'm going to try and get myself along to it. So I know you've got quite a lot of dates after the summer, but what is the plans for the year?
We're kind of hunkering down, getting through the snow right now, but, we're always keeping new music top of mind, always, looking for opportunities to write, record, and keep those creative gears going. In April, we're doing a cruise with Creed, the Creed cruise. So that's going to be amazing. Looking forward to, doing that. It's a lot of great bands are going to be on that. I think Fuel's on there, and of course Creed, and maybe Default I think I saw is on there, which I'm super excited about that. Living Color. We'll get out and do some touring in the States this spring and summer, and then get on a plane and come over and see you guys with our buddies in 10 years this fall. So it's going to be great.
That'll be cool. I'll give you a shout closer to the time. But before we finish things up, Steve, I like to ask some fun questions. I'll ask the questions, you tell me what pops into your head, okay? So imagine you've got a time machine. You could go back in time, anywhere in the world. What is the one concert that you wish you could have attended?
Oh, there's definitely a lot, but I'll see if I can narrow it down to two.
Go for it.
I just love so much those live at the Fillmore days in the late 60s and the early 70s. You know, I would want to go back and catch the Allman Brothers live at the Fillmore when they recorded that record. Humble Pie, I'm a huge Humble Pie fan, that live at the Fillmore record that they made. Yep. And Aretha Franklin's live at the Fillmore West in California. So just, I want to go back, man, in the late 60s and just go to those live at the Fillmore shows.
Yeah.
They were special.
See, thinking of your own career, Blackstone Cherry, that you've been with them for a while now. If you could go back in time and attend one of your own Blackstone Cherry gigs, is there one that stands out for you?
Oh, man. Probably Royal Albert Hall.
Yeah.
That would have been a cool one to maybe sit out in the crowd and kind of watch. And that's still one of those shows, man. It's been, 2-ish years, maybe a little bit longer, 3 years. I can't even remember. It goes by quick, man. But I still just have to go back and watch footage and look at the tour poster in front of my Marshall cab here and just try to reminisce and remember and soak it all in and take it all in. But, I think I'd go with that one, Royal Albert Hall.
That's fine. By another band, do you have a favourite album cover? Is there one that comes to mind?
Great question.
The reason I ask is I feel like artwork, it's a sort of dying. A lot of people don't think it's as relevant nowadays, but I don't know if it's because of when I was brought up. To me, the artwork's just as important as the songs. You know, it's all part of the same package. But do you have a favourite album cover by another band?
I've always really loved the album cover to the Layla album by Derek and the Dominoes, with the half woman's face, the artistic, the value there, the symmetry, just everything that entails, and sometimes just some more like surrealism type imagery, like the Alice in Chains record, the Flies in a Jar. Just something kind of just simple and random like that. So. I think I'd go with those two. That's fine. Ask me tomorrow, it could change.
Of course. As you know, thousands and thousands of great songs written and recorded across the years by different artists. What's the one song that you wish you could have sat in the recording studio to witness the band record the song?
Oh, great question.
And again, it's probably one of those, the answer could change daily, but is it the one that comes to mind today?
I've always kind of cited during on a question kind of like this, Blue Sky by the Allman Brothers. I think that song could cause world peace tomorrow if everybody just stopped for 30 minutes and listened to it a couple times.
Well, that's fine.
That one and maybe Walk by Pantera.
Oh, that would have been cool.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah.
Now, plenty of Van Halen stuff I could choose too.
You've been very kind talking about Chris, Ben and John. Painted them in a really good light. So I'm going to ask you a question now that might paint one of them in a bad light. So imagine you've got a dead body in the back of your car. It's 4:00 in the morning and you need help disposing of this body. No questions asked. Which member of Blackstone Cherry are you calling for help and why?
Which man? Oh man. Let's see. I'd probably call Chris.
Why?
I think Chris would be down. I think he would probably not tell on me. He'd be right there with me. Maybe the guilt wouldn't like eat at him as bad. Well, I mean, I say that because like when he loves you, man, he loves you, and he's always there. So are Ben and John Fripp. They love you, man. They love you. So I'm going to call all three of them. What about that?
It sounds like Chris has got your back, but he can also keep a secret.
Yeah, there you go. That's important too.
That's fine. And, last question for yourself. Again, the answer could probably change daily, but for today, who is your Mount Rushmore when it comes to bands? Who's the 4 bands for yourself that you just love?
I have to go right out of the gate. Well, I'm going to say Leonard Skinner because that's the first band that I fell in love with, because of my dad turning me on to that music and playing that music with my dad growing up as a kid. And it's so special to me. And, I've always said, even growing up, like, I never had any dreams or goals of winning a Grammy or winning any kind of awards or anything like that. If it happens off merit, that's truly humbling. But I've always said, my goal as a kid growing up was to do good enough to maybe one day I could open for a band like Leonard Skinner and have my dad there to get to watch it side stage and witness it. And I've been able to accomplish that in my life. That happened a couple short years ago. My dad got to come when we opened for Skinner, first time me being in the band. So it's all just uphill from here. Everything else is just a blessing. So Skinner would be number 1. And then I'd have to say the Allman Brothers, because they have taught me so much over the years musically. The Allman Brothers is the first band that ever made jazz music make sense to me. Because even when I tried listening to the greats like Thelonious Monk or Coltrane or Miles Davis, I just couldn't get it until I listened to the Allman Brothers, because they, paired it with some blues, and that's what made it make sense for me. And it's just, I've learned so much from their music over the years. It's amazing. Third, I would probably have to go with Van Halen.
Yep.
It's just the perfect songwriting for musicians, I feel like, especially guitarists. Like, Eddie's got the chops for days, but he can also sit back and play something so simplistic like Panama, but he can do both, which is sometimes hard to do, which is have great songwriting and great musicianship. So, bands like them or Alter Bridge or Creed, or Mammoth, I've always loved those bands so much because they really have both, which I really love. And that's the songs and the musicianship.
I sometimes think someone as talented as Eddie Van Halen, sometimes they're only able to play technically difficult things. It's like they can't pull it back. So it's always refreshing when you've got someone that can go to opposite ends of the spectrum. You've got extremely difficult guitar playing, but you've got beautiful, simple guitar playing, and someone that can do both, which doesn't always happen. It's really to listen to. Absolutely.
And I guess my fourth and final one I'd end with would probably have to be the Kentucky Headhunters, because they were our Led Zeppelin in our area growing up, if you will, and they've accomplished so much. From winning a Grammy off their first record and everything. And they're another perfect example of songwriting, can take you so far in this business. And, I call it, like, if I had to dissect their career and what kind of helped them break out, I call it the Kentucky Headhunters effect. They wrote a song called Dumas Walker that was on the first record, Picking on Nashville. And I remember the guitarist Greg Martin telling me multiple times that when that song first came out, radio stations did not want to play it because they thought it sounded too regional. They thought it sounded too small market. They thought that people on a broader audience scale wouldn't be able to connect with that. But they were hugely, hugely wrong. And so that's why, you can't always listen to naysayers and people that doubt you and don't believe in you, because they didn't get the reference. The reference was they were talking about one of their favorite places to hang out. It just so happens was like a small hole-in-a-wall restaurant / bar type place. And what they didn't understand is that other people across the world connected with that. They all have their own favorite watering holes or bars or pubs or whatever, to hang out with. So they connected with that song. So when that song came out, so many people were calling into radio stations across the country that radio had no choice but to play it. And I think that's the trick. You write a song that connects with people so hard and so genuine that will take you through everything and make you rise up through all kinds of barriers that's made it hard on you. But yeah, Kentucky Headhunters, my fourth and final Mount Rushmore.
That's cool, Steve. Well, thank you so much for making a bit of time out of your day to come on to the podcast. For anybody obviously wanting to get news on the band, www.blackstonecherry.com. All the information is there. I always encourage people buy the music. This day and age, obviously, you can download, you can stream. It's not my preferred way, but I mean, it is a way of getting the music. Of course, more importantly, when tickets are available for sale in your area, go see the band, buy a T-shirt, buy some merchandise, help the band out. That's what it's all about. But go and see the band live. Every band sounds better in the live environment. And I wish you all the continued success. I look forward to the new music that's coming out. As I said, you are here in 30th of October in Edinburgh. I'll give you a shout closer to the time. We can maybe meet up. I'll buy you a drink. And
yeah, man.
It'll be a good laugh. But until then, Steve, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for coming on. And I look forward to watching your career continue to progress and to flourish as well.
Hey, man, thank you so much for having me, and thanks to the listeners for listening to me, and we'll see you when we come across the pond, brother.
Cheers, pal. See you later on. Thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below. Thank you.